Welcome back, everyone. This is the last lesson in our series of belief, and then we'll move on with the submission, the acts of submission, such as prayer and then fasting and charity and so on. But we've already mentioned God and angels and messengers and the scriptures and belief in afterlife and how it all calls out for justice. That you get away from the law of this land, you're gonna eventually be accounted for in the afterlife. So this is all about setting our mindset to be really, being aware of what's going on around us and watching out every single action that we do because it is going to affect our real life, which will be forever, which will be in hereafter. So as we were talking about justice and the whole point of Islam is to establish justice in society, and justice cannot come unless you are following one God. Because if you are following more than one God, it's like imagine having two bosses, right? And I'm sure some of you probably are going through that at your workplace, and it's a chaos. And imagine if you had multiple gods, and we have a concept of three gods in Islam, in Christianity, and some religions have multiple gods. And Islam is all calling out for one God, and that's the only way you can have justice in society. And at the same time, when you are learning this concept of decree and this divine will of God, know that justice is being established over here. Know that God is just. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. That a lot of times you can, get into a lot of discussion in this topic, but the key is, in order to really understand this topic, know that God is just. Whatever He decrees, whatever He wills, if He's the most just, then whatever He has decreed, whatever He willed, is justice. Okay, if He's the most just, then He did it according to His wisdom. And another verse from the Quran that really helps us understand this concept is that He is not asked about what He does, but they are asked. Who are they? People, right? Muslims or non-Muslims. We will be asked about what we do, but not God. Okay, God is not going to be asked about, or Allah is not going to be questioned about what He does and His wisdom and why did He do this and why there's so much misery and so much corruption, so much, if God really exists, then how come there's all this evil around us? Then the evil is not attributed to God and His will. Okay, evil is actually attributed to us, us human beings. Another concept that you must know is that, that as a human being, we might think that, something is good for us, but it is bad for us. This is one of the verses in Quran. And then also God has mentioned that something is, you might think that something is actually bad for us, but in the end, it is actually good for us. Okay, this is actually one of the verses in Quran which tells us that, that sometimes we go through different steps in life, different trials, different things, and different events that we go through, and we say, hey, you know what, this doesn't make sense. I thought this was good for me. How come I'm not getting it? Or why am I getting it when it's so bad and so hurtful and so painful for me? And all of these questions that come in our mind, and just always know that God is the most just. Okay, you cannot question Him about what He does. Okay, whatever He does it out of justice. And you might think that something is actually good for you, right? But it's actually bad for you. And you might think that something is bad for you, but it's actually good for you. Okay, our job at the end of the day is to make sure that we do our part. We do our part in whatever we are doing, making sure that we're putting our effort into whatever it is, and we're making sure that we are following the commands of God, doing all the good things, staying away from bad things, and that is what truly matters for us. Everything else, we leave it on God. And so let's get into topic about this, divine decree and divine will. And I'll be very transparent that this is a concept. Again, this is a concept of unseen, and at the same time that God has actually asked us not to dive into this topic so much. Yes, we should be studying this topic, and that's why I'm going to give you this topic in a very high level. But even then, if you're not able to, understand it 100%, don't get too much into it, because it was actually mentioned by Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that previous nations were destroyed because they got into this concept of, they really dove too much into the concept of the will of God, and started talking about things like, well, how come this is happening to us? This is being willed by God, and things like that. And that is something that we see that is going around us right now, where a lot of people are just losing their faith because they'll fail their exam or their dog will die. And well, it was decreed by God, okay, that it was time for your dog's death. Doesn't mean that God doesn't exist anymore, right? So anything good, bad, whether sweet or bitter, know that it was will of God. Not even a leaf, falls from tree except that he knows it. This is talking about his divine knowledge, okay? Without his permission, not even a leaf can fall. And this should give us this hope and this sense of, again, peace in our mind, that if there's some injustice that's happening to us, know that God knows about it. If he even knows about a leaf falling from a tree, he's the one who gives that leaf life, and he's the one who gives that leaf, or even a little grass out there, little plant that you think is just unnoticed, right? Even Allah is giving it, that plant, life. What about us human being? If we're going through some hard times, know that God knows of it, right? And everything that is happening is because of his permission. He willed it, right? So again, you might think that something is good for you, but it's actually bad for you. You might think something is bad for you, but it is good for you. Not even a leaf falls from the tree except by his permission, except that he knows of it. So the divine decree actually calls out for many things, such as it calls out for eternal knowledge of God. Okay, and when we say that God knows what's going to happen in the future, God knows what has already happened in the past. That is part of his decree. Okay, and this shows his comprehensive ability, right, to do everything. That he knows what's going to happen in the future. He knows exactly what has happened in the past. His knowledge is different than ours. That is what makes him different than his creation. But know that he has this eternal knowledge. He knows what's going to happen in the future. Why? Because everything is already written. The first thing that he created was pen, and then he told pen to write, and then the pen asked, what should I write? And he said, write everything that is going to happen. And then basically you might say, hey, well, then what's the point of us? Well, remember that God is the most just. Okay, yes, he willed everything, but that doesn't mean that that us human beings are, let's say you're moving your hand up and you're pull out a gun and shoot somebody. That was something that that was commanded to you by God. No, that was something that was your action. Okay, you fulfilled it. That is why God has given us this free will to fulfill our action. But know that he has this eternal knowledge, and he knows what's going to happen in the future, but at the same time he has written it down. Okay, it was already written. It is already written how much money you're going to make. And if it wasn't written for you, you're not going to get it. And if there was some loss that happened in your life, know that it was already written way before you were even born. Because remember, God created pen and he wrote it. He told it to write down everything that is going to happen till the end of time. And that again goes back to giving us this sense of peace, that if there was something that we missed in this life, then you know that, hey, it was already decreed. But again, that does not mean that we do not do our part. We cannot just sit back and relax and say, yep, God has already written what we're going to make, so we're going to how much money he's going to give us, so we can just sit back and relax and we're going to get that money. Basically, we have to do our part. Okay, and know that in that process there are some good things that are going to happen, there's some bad things going to happen. You don't know whether they were really good or bad, because Allah knows what's really good for you and what's bad for you. Maybe you lost a job. Hey, maybe there's something else lined up out there. So in that process, you might go through some hard times for 2 or 3 months, but later on the outcome will be better. And at the same time, do not ask why God did this and why God did that, because nobody's supposed to ask him for his wisdom, right? He does everything out of justice, and we're the ones who are going to be asked about what we did. So our goal is to make sure that we are following the commands of God, leave everything on him, do our part, okay, in the process, which is to worship him, to make sure we follow his commandment, and always know that God has eternal knowledge. He knows what's going to happen in the future. Everything is already written down, okay? So he already knows what's going to happen in the future, and he has this comprehensive ability to make everything happen, okay? And whatever he does is for your own good. You might not know it right now, but you will know it later. Not even a leaf falls from the tree except by his permission, except by his knowledge. So this is the concept of divine decree. Again, we can have a whole lesson on this, but this is something that is recommended not dive into this topic so much, and then people have lost faith in God because they started discussing this topic so much and asking questions about his wisdom, right? Why God does this, why God does that. I thought he willed it. Well, if he willed it, well, then I can just sit back and relax. No. Few points that you just need to know about this divine decree and the will of God is on the screen. Know that God is just. Do your part. He has knowledge about everything, including what's going to happen in future. Everything is already written down because God has knowledge about what's going to happen in the future. But human beings have the ability to fulfill our actions. Okay, to fulfill our actions. And then, of course, we need to make sure that these actions follow, the commandments of God. The commandments of God. Because anything good or bad that we do, we got to make sure that we are within the guidance that is given to us in Quran, okay, and the sayings of the prophets. So with that, we'll end. That was the topic of divine decree and will of God. We have covered all 6 major pillars of faith, of belief in Islam. And in next section, we'll be covering the 5 pillars of Islam, meaning submission to God.